Hey y'all, welcome. Today we are going to answer the question, what are vaccines? You may know vaccines as something that protects you from a disease and prevents you from getting sick, but we're going to dive deeper into that today. We will go over the history of vaccines and how they came to be, the idea behind the use of vaccines and what they are actually doing within our bodies, and the type of vaccines, because crazily enough, there are several types of vaccines that we use to protect us from all kinds of diseases. To start, immunization, or protection from diseases, originally comes from variolation, which protects people from smallpox. They took smallpox scabs from the infected, and the healthy inhaled those scabs, which induces a smaller smallpox response than would be produced naturally. And while it sounds gross, it increased the chance of someone surviving smallpox, but it did not guarantee it. Variolation still sometimes resulted in death. It wasn't until Edward Jenner in the late 1700s that the vaccine was discovered. Dr. Jenner noticed that despite how deadly and widespread smallpox was, milkmaids seemingly never got it if they had already had cowpox, which was a similar disease in cows. Using his theory, he infected a young farmhand with pus from a cowpox sore, causing mild illness, but when the boy was infected with smallpox a few weeks later, he remained in perfect health. Thus, the vaccine was invented as one of the earliest modern technologies, considering anesthesia was first used 50 years later, X-rays were invented 100 years later, and the first heart valve surgery was performed 130 years after the vaccine was discovered. Now, let's get into why vaccines actually work. It's time to introduce the immune system. We have innate immune reactions, which are what your body does naturally and it's non-specific. This is like how the skin and hair keep out dangerous diseases. Vaccines, however, work with adaptive immune reactions, which are specific actions against specific pathogens or infections, and this is controlled by immunological memory. Key players within the immune system are pathogens, which are the infecting agents such as viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites, and more. Antigens, the proteins or name tags on the pathogen that allow the immune system to identify it. Antibodies, proteins that bind to antigens and flag immune cells to destroy the pathogen. B cells, which create antibodies, and T cells, which work with B cells to identify a pathogen and then destroy the pathogen. The end goal of a vaccine is to provide a primary or first response to a pathogen, so exposure later results in a person not getting sick because the adaptive immune system responds faster and more effectively than it would without that first exposure. Now, a vaccine works by providing a safe antigen to the body. Once injected, that antigen will be presented to the B cell in a lymph node, the home of the immune cells, which may pair with a T cell. The B cell will then produce antibodies while the T cell destroys infected cells. Some B cells only match with an antigen partially, like a bad puzzle piece, but the best B cell and antigen matches are preserved and turned into memory cells, which act to quickly produce antibodies at the next exposure. This memory acts as a blueprint for the immune reaction the second time around, causing a person to either never develop symptoms or develop much more minor symptoms that go away faster. Now, there are a few different types of vaccines. Ultimately, there are 8 that we'll go over. These different types of vaccines are necessary to effectively create an immune response for different pathogens. The most commonly used and oldest type of vaccine is the live attenuated vaccine. This was the type that Edward Jenner, the vaccine discoverer, found. The word attenuated means weakened, meaning that the live attenuated vaccine uses a weakened version of the whole pathogen that cannot cause diseases. This is like how the cowpox disease is much less overpowering to the immune system than smallpox, but it creates a memory similar enough to smallpox that the immune system can fight smallpox with no problem. Examples of live attenuated vaccines that we use would include the measles, mumps, and rubella, MMR, rotavirus, and chickenpox vaccines. Another vaccine similar to the live attenuated vaccine is the inactivated vaccine. This vaccine also uses the entire pathogen, but this pathogen is killed. It can no longer replicate because it was killed by heat or chemicals. This creates a more minor immune response, but we still use it today in the polio vaccine that was created 70 years ago. The next 3 vaccines are similar to each other in that they all use antigen proteins only and not the whole pathogen. Toxoid vaccines use the exotoxin proteins produced in a bacterial infection to create a reaction that will neutralize that harmful exotoxin, rather than attack the pathogen itself. An example of this would be the tetanus vaccine, or tetanus shot. Subunit and conjugate vaccines, meanwhile, use proteins as antigens to prompt an immune response that will result in destroying the pathogen cells. Example of subunit and conjugate vaccines that we use would be the hepatitis B, HPV, and bacterial meningitis vaccines. Next, we have 3 types of vaccines that are experimental or new to the market, with one of those being very revolutionary. Recombinant vector vaccines code an antigen into the DNA of an everyday harmless bacteria in order to signal an immune response. This has been used in trials for the HIV and norovirus vaccines. Meanwhile, DNA vaccines are composed of pathogen DNA only and have been used in flu and herpes vaccine trials. The important vaccine, though, is the mRNA vaccine. This vaccine creates an immune response by carrying the code for an antigen and delivering it directly to the adaptive immune system without triggering an innate immune system response, which would weaken the immunological memory. The Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines are mRNA vaccines and showed a bright future for this type of vaccine. Now, in this video, we learned that vaccines have existed for over 200 years and have been well researched and well used in that time. Vaccines use immunological memory within the adaptive immune system to create faster and more effective immune responses to minimize the impact of disease and symptoms. Vaccines present antigens which signal B cells to create antibodies, which act as a guide for the immune system when that pathogen next infects a person. Finally, we have 8 types of vaccines in use or being tested, including live attenuated, inactivated, toxoid, subunit, conjugate, recombinant vector, DNA, and mRNA vaccines. These vaccines effectively use pathogens differently to create the immune response that will protect a person most from infectious and deadly diseases. We will explore this last idea more in the next video when we answer the question, why does the type of vaccine matter? Thank you for watching and see you next time.